So good afternoon, everyone. And thank you all for being here. I'm going to begin with just some administrative announcements. The event is being recorded, so please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Please turn on your video and have your full name showing so our presenters can see who they're speaking with, especially also in the Q&A when we're doing the Brady Bunch squares. We can see everyone. The rules of engagement for the panel program will be explained prior to the first panelist speaking. And then to help facilitate the connections and networking part of our event, go ahead and use the chat channel to provide your name and point of contact information. Include what you offer in your service or product or what you are seeking in support or help from the Purple Connection community. The chat will be saved and it will get cleaned up and shared to everyone who attends in an email tomorrow. Everybody who has signed up through the registration, even if they do not show up for the event today, they will receive a link to the recorded program, which we will have sent out in an email in a few days. So with those admin announcements made, then we're going to go ahead and get started with the program slides. So David, go ahead and bring those up. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I am Emma Toops, Executive Director for American Warriors and the facilitator for the Purple Connection. This event is hosted and sponsored by Toops Consulting, LLC. This is the business that David and I run. We are connectors, coaches, and consultants in Toops Consulting, and we thank you all for being here. Welcome especially to those who this is your first Purple Connection event. For our new attendees, thank the person who invited you. They felt you might benefit from participating or contributing to this community. To our regulars, it's good to see you. Here's the event agenda. Next slide, please. All right, I am doing the welcome now. I'll go on to do an introduction.
On LinkedIn as well.
Hello. Please mute if you're not speaking. Thank you. There'll be an introduction to American Warriors and Purple Connection that I will do. And then I'll introduce the program with some ROE. We'll do the program followed by a Q&A. And then after the Q&A, we will do a transition tip presentation. Then I will talk a little bit about how you can get more involved in between Purple Connection events, and then we'll do a lineup preview for next month and wrap up the meeting. Next slide. All right, so first, an introduction to American Warriors and the Purple Connection. American Warriors is a special interest group of the ACA Business Club. It's a private club with the philosophy that business flows out of relationships. So people will do business with those that they know, like, or trust. Thus, club members are committed to creating solid connections by learning and practicing the fundamentals of strategic networking and relationship building. American Warriors are club members who have an affinity with or support those who have served our country in military or public service. The mission statement for American Warriors is to provide educational and networking opportunities to veterans who are leaders in business. And we also support the transition of active duty service members into private and public sector business. The Purple Connection is one vehicle for American Warriors to fulfill its mission. Next slide. So the challenges of transitioning from the military is a very well-researched problem. It's evident by the multitude of military support nonprofits, community organizations, and businesses that provide services or opportunities to address them. Driving Community Impact was a white paper published in April of 2015 by the IVMF of Syracuse University, and it determined after several years of research and thousands of surveys that the leading gap in services and support was not the lack of them, but the lack of connectedness of them. So very often, transitioning military feel a loss of purpose or a feeling of isolation or being misunderstood, or they feel overwhelmed for the need of help or support in learning what to do in this new environment. They feel disconnected or lack affinity to the people or culture of their new environment. Next slide. So how do you solve this? You create a partnership of stakeholders who have a common goal for supporting American warriors. The Purple Connection is a community of partnered stakeholders with a common focus of service, support, and care so that we can effectively address the challenges of transition. Next slide. So what's up with the name? There's actually two reasons for it. In military jargon, the color for joint is purple. When our military is operating overseas on a deployment, that environment is comprised of a multitude of seemingly disparate entities with differing purposes, but they have a common purpose through the operation that unites and focuses their effort. The Purple Connection is an attempt to replicate this type of joint environment to support the American warrior in transition. Another reason is that when you combine the colors of red and blue, you get the color purple. So in the Purple Connection, we're facilitating the connection of individuals who identify more closely to either the military community or the military support and business community. And when they come together, it is a Purple Connection. Next slide. So the Purple Connection's vision and mission are shown here. We create awareness to enable access and then empower action through collaboration and encouragement to expedite reintegration, support growth and healing, and enable opportunities. We do this by regularly bringing together community experts and facilitating connections through educational networking. Next slide. Okay, so here are the rules of engagement for our program. Each participant will have 8 minutes to deliver their remarks. There will be a timer. The time can be stopped short and given back for some questions and answers or used up entirely by the panelist. However, when the timer does go off, please wrap up if you're still speaking, and we'll move on to the next presenter. Once each panelist has spoken, there'll be 15 minutes for Q&A. If you're uncomfortable with public speaking or you want to remain anonymous with your question, you can private message your question to me and I will ask it for you. During the Q&A period, we will be back in the Brady Bunch squares, so people will be able to see you. Please be succinct in your questions and direct them to a specific panelist or to the community if it's a more general transition question. If you have a complicated, very individualized question, you may ask it to discover if there's a subject matter expert in the community, in the audience. But if the response takes longer than 2 minutes to address, I'll recommend that follow-up be done after the event. After the Q&A, there'll be 8 minutes for a transition tip. This is an educational presentation for a paradigm, perspective, a process or resource or something to this effect that applies to transition. After the presentations, if you haven't already, share in the public chat your point of contact information and how you serve or need support from the community. The chat will be saved and all attendees will get a cleaned up copy in a future email so you can follow up with each other as you like. I will do event announcements and then wrap up the event. All right, next slide. Oh, that's not it. There it is. So first up is our veteran entrepreneur. Mark Wiggins is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel and the owner of MHW PR and Communications. I see that Mark is on. So Mark, you're up.
All right. Had to get myself muted there. Hello, everybody. I'm going to go quickly through the business side of things because you can go to my website and it's pretty straightforward, or my LinkedIn account, and you can see what I do for a living there. Not to depart from the intent here, but also talk about why I went into business, because when you talk about veteran entrepreneurs in this particular forum, I think I don't think, Emma, you'd disagree that it's probably just as important how I got to this point versus what I'm really doing now. I could be chasing chickens for a living for all that matters, but what led to this point, bottom line is, like Emma said, I spent 23 years in the Army. I started out enlisted, and I graduated in 2004, a lieutenant colonel. I didn't walk away mad. It was just time to go. I think we've all been there. The pull on the family side was a little much, and not ever being at home very often, that even when you're home, you're not home, so I made the decision to go ahead and retire. When I retired, though, then I started looking around, and like everybody else, I was in DC. I worked for the Army Chief of Staff in the Pentagon, and I walked away from some good opportunities out there in the Northern Virginia, DC area, but I just wanted out of that whole game. I was tired of it. I didn't like the sort of culture, if you will, that was out there. I obviously dealt with it when I was working, for the chief, but after that, I just wanted to be done. And my wife's from Iowa, so she picked Kansas City. I let her choose and said, "Where do you want to go?" And so she picked Kansas City, because we had been at Fort Leavenworth for a year. And so we packed up and here we came. No friends, no family, no jobs. Just another move. So I started looking around for a job, and I ended up, I hired on with a company out here in town, and financial services company. I'll leave them unnamed because my review of them is not very kind. But I said, well, I'm not going to look too much. Big mistake, I guess. But on the other hand, it was a great learning period for me, because I spent 1 year and 3 months working for them, but I actually spent everything beyond the first 6 months devising my exit strategy to go on and do something else. So I finally pulled the trigger and submitted my resignation about 1 year and 3 months into that job. My resignation basically was a 3-page sheet list of bullets of all the reasons why I was leaving, and none of them had to do with pay. It was everything to do with the so-called culture that they had, their lack of true leadership, and their disinterest in really caring for the people that they said they cared for. So it was just a lot of hoo-ha. There was no there. Some nice people, though, don't get me wrong. It wasn't completely evil. It's just they were off track. So I started looking around again, and about a month into my search, it was one of those address yourself kind of problems. And I said, well, if you're so smart, why don't you just do this yourself? And so that's what I did. And I did some research, found out that, if there were any tax consequences I was going to be exposed to, and things like that, and any legalities and so forth. So I started my own business, and it's me. So it was totally up to me. My name, what I could do was on the line. So I basically sent an email to everybody that I knew and said, hey, I've hung out my own shingle. You know me, you know what I can do. If you need help, give me a call. Well, it took probably, oh, good grief, a good 3 or 4 months before I ever got my first client. So it was some thin months there, looking around, and I was, thinking, can I really do this? And I'm going to take this irritating background off. But I did it. I got the first client about 3 or 4 months into it, and it was small, but I just started working from there. And you can go to my website. I thought long and hard about the name of my business, right? It's basically my initials. and I added the and communications part later, because one of the things I already kind of knew this, but as I traveled the path of trying to do business with people, no one really understood what public relations was anyway. You're constantly having to explain it. It just became a useless fight. It wasn't helping. So I added and communications. So that's really the way I ended up explaining it to people. Is basically any kind of communications work needed to support a business. That's what I can do for you. Whether it's a website, whether it's just simple writing, whether it's a campaign of sorts, or maybe it's just an event, whatever it might be. There's an entire list of stuff that
I'm gonna run here.
it's on my website.
Let's see what we got out in the truck.
Typically what I do. I don't have employees. I was really tempted there for a few years to get employees, because there were times when I was working 50, 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week, pulling all-nighters to keep up with project work. But fortunately, I avoided the temptation to hire full-time employees. And so what I've done is I have subcontractors, 1099 folks if I need the help. But one of the key things, back to the transition tip side of things, is one of the things I learned long ago is in trying to run my own business, it sure is a lot cheaper to do business if you can do a lot of the work yourself. So you can have all the fancy, letters after your name and all the education and so-called experience. But if you can't actually produce something that's tangible that you can control, then you're going to have to pay somebody else to provide that. And so it's a little selfish. Maybe I'm a little cheap too, but I hone my skills. And so when somebody comes to me for, to work on a magazine, for example, do layout design work for a magazine, well, I don't hire that out. I do it myself. Now, sometimes it's a bigger project and deadlines are short, and so I'll get some help. But the point is that one of the transition tips that I would throw at anybody, not just military folks, but at some point, skills are more important than education. I mean, certainly I'm not disparaging the value of education, but you've got to be able to do something with it. And again, all the fancy letters after your name, they don't mean a whole lot if you can't do anything with them. And unfortunately, there's a lot of folks in my background that, they ride the rank, or they ride the accolade, but you get them in a quiet room and give them a blank piece of paper to stubby pencil, and that's what you end up with 3 hours later, because there's no there. You got to be able to produce. And so that's what I've tried to do in my business, is actually produce. And so I spend less time talking about it, more time doing. Especially in my line of work, there's a lot of talkers, right? Because that's theoretically what you do for a living, is you talk. But actually, in public relations communications work, there's a lot of just good old nut works, you sitting in front of the keyboard and cranking it out, doing research, and a lot of legwork stuff before it ever sees the light of day. Public relations is not squeezing elbows at fancy dinner parties. You might find yourself doing that on some occasion, but bottom line is, if there's one core skill that you need in this line of work, it's the ability to write and edit. If you can't do that, you're kind of lost. A lot of us in the military, and frankly, even in the civilian business world, claim they can write and edit, but if you've ever seen a writing sample, we all know what some of those look like. So that's a tip I give anybody, not just transitioning military officers, is the ability to write and edit is certainly key to having any kind of success, because somebody gets alone with something that you've written, it tells a story, and you're not even in the room to defend it. So writing and editing is definitely important. It goes into all the plans that you do. And again, I spend less time doing formal plans, because my clients, customers, whatever you want to call them, they're not interested in my ability to lay out, a 5-paragraph operations order in the military style, or some campaign plan that has 42 subsections that talk about this and that and the other. What they want is the results from all that. They don't pay me to write a plan. They want the results of the plan. And so I try to keep a lot of that hidden from them, because a lot of times I'll write the plan in my head in a couple hours, and then it's on to the tactics and strategies that we're going to use to execute the plan and try to get some results.
Please wrap up, Mark.
I'm sorry, what was that, Emma?
I'm sorry, please wrap up. The timer has gone off.
Okay. Well, bottom line is it's a lot of writing and editing is key in my line of work. And so that's what I would offer. Again, my list of services that I provide are on my website, mhwpr.com. I put my contact info in the chat. I've got a lot of lessons learned in terms of transitioning, but I'm certainly willing to answer those as time goes on here. But I'm having fun. Like I say, I'm not getting rich, but I'm paying the bills, so that's okay with me.
All right. Well, good, good. Well, I'm sure there'll probably be some questions in the Q&A that can talk to maybe some specific contributions that you've made on particular projects or work. All right. Thank you, Mark. Our next presenter is our military support nonprofit. Deann Mitchell is the Vice President of Marketing of Veterans Voice. So Deann, are you there?
I am here.
All right, you are up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And that's actually an old logo, and I'll explain the difference between that logo and our new one. So I
Okay.
apologize. But I am a board member of Veterans Voices Writing Project. The project started back in the 1940s as an outreach project for hospitalized veterans that were coming home from World War II. And that is why you'll notice on our logo, the HVWP originally stood for Hospitalized Veterans Writing Project. We changed that a couple of years ago to Veterans Voices Writing Project to alleviate the confusion that we only worked with veterans that were hospitalized, which is not true. So we are a nonprofit that is based here in Kansas City. Again, we are close to 75 years old. And our mission is to enable military veterans to experience solace and satisfaction through writing and art. We have an affinity for our authors who share with us terribly interesting stories and very personal artwork. And it's both a therapeutic project and an entertainment project. I've been on the board for about 10 years. I am not a veteran, but I was asked by a board member to attend a meeting and learn more about the organization. And when I got there, I knew 3 of the board members, and I didn't know they knew each other. And so I took that as a sign that I was meant to be involved. And like I said, I've been involved for about 10 years. We are 75 years old. We are based here in Kansas City. Our office is in the VFW building on Broadway. Broadway and 31st, roughly. And so when our project began back in the mid 40s, we had such a outpouring of manuscripts that within a couple of years, we decided to start publishing them in a magazine forms to showcase the veterans' work. And our first Veterans Voices magazine was published in 1952. And we remain the only magazine in the nation devoted solely to the work of veterans. Veterans Voices is published 3 times a year in print and in digital format. So people can subscribe to get it in paper form, or you can go to our website, veteransvoices.org, and read it digitally. So the Kansas City VA Hospital provides shipping so that we can ship our print magazines to all the other VA locations nationwide. So we do ship about 5,000 magazines throughout the nation to VA centers and veterans hospitals and VA centers all throughout the United States. And then we have a number of other magazines available for our subscribers. So we publish about 20,000 magazines a year. We publish 3 times a year. A lot of people question, does the VA fund us? And no, the VA does not fund us, but they do help us with those shipping costs. Our project is funded by some grants and some corporate sponsorships, but our primary funding source is individual donations and subscriptions. An annual subscription is $35 and can be requested from our website, again, veteransvoices.org. And our website has a lot of different information about the history of the organization, as well as a way for veterans to submit their manuscripts. A veteran can register and log in and create their own user password, and then actually submit their work electronically. We accept prose, poems, and artwork, pictures of artwork. And when an author is published, they receive a small stipend, along with the knowledge that their work is being published to a worldwide audience. And that's, veterans tell us that that's very, very moving, that their work is put out there to a large audience. Submissions can be about anything. Of course, a lot of them are about military service and stories from the service. Some of them are dark. Some of them are funny. All of them are touching because the writing is from the heart. People wonder what to write about, but when they sit down and start writing, you know, the most common thing I hear is, I'm telling the story that I want my family to know about. I'm sharing what I want my grandkids to hear, which makes it all the more heartwarming. As an author, you have a digital archive of your own work within your profile. And one of our goals as an organization is to digitize all 70 years of our magazine so that we have a digital archive of all of our work. That would be such a great database of information for historians and scholars. Families could look up things that their deceased loved ones have written over the years. So that's one thing that we're really trying to accomplish, is to get that digital archive put together. That's an ongoing project. But I'll be here for any questions. Please visit veteransvoices.org. It's a wonderful organization, and we couldn't be here without the love and support of the veteran community. So thank you, Emma, for allowing me to share information.
All right, very good. We have 1 minute left in your 8 minutes. Does someone have a quick question for Deann?
I could show our website if I can have control to share screen.
Well, I'd like you to just share the URL, and we'll have that sent to everyone. I do have one question.
Okay.
So the magazine is a published paper magazine as well as a digital magazine.
That is correct.
It's published 3 times a year.
Yes, it's published 3 times a year, spring, summer, and fall. And it is published in print form, and it is published in digital form. So if you go to the website, veteransvoices.org, you can see the full print magazine in a flip book, and you can focus in and enhance the print in case you're on a smaller device. So it's the exact same thing as the print magazine.
All right.
And if this question is how long for the company to respond to a submission, it depends on how many submissions we get. We get monthly anywhere from 50 to 100 submissions, and we publish about 25 prose and 30 poems each edition. So it depends on how many we get and how many we have to sort through to depend when things get submitted for publication.
Okay.
I just heard the timer.
I'll
put information.
It's really loud for me. So if you see my face go, then it is time's up. But good. We'll have more questions in the Q&A period. So we'll have a little bit more that we can ask you about in a little bit.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you
Thanks,
so
Emma.
much, Deann. Our next presenter is going to be, oh, actually, yeah. Is Jim on? Okay. Our next presenter is our military-friendly corporate. Jim Kane is a retired Army major who only in the last month is now a veteran entrepreneur. Today, however, he's going to be talking about T-Mobile as he was with their business transformation office for 2.5 years. I hope Jim's on. Is Jim on? Jim, are you there?
I don't see him in any of the pictures or squares.
Yeah, I know that he had something going on earlier this afternoon, but it was supposed to be done by now. Well, maybe we might have to circle back for Jim. I will send him a text and we can go ahead and start our Q&A then. Let me reset my timer. Let me figure this out. Here we go. Okay, we'll go ahead and start our 15-minute Q&A. And I'll send a text to Jim and see if he's gonna be able to make it. Does somebody have a question for either Mark or Deann specifically, or something in general for the community?
And I'll ask a question.
Okay,
Well, hey, Mark, I worked with you on the Command General Staff College International Celebration of Friendship, and I was really impressed with how you put that event together. I mean, working with people from all over the world and something like that. I just want to ask you, how do you go about, what is your process of organizing an event when you do something of that magnitude?
Well, the easy answer to that question is have a lot of help.
and get the guy who pronounces all the names, right, of all the foreign officers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I say that jokingly, but the answer truly is you got to build a team. And for that particular event, obviously the right member of the team for us to have was Mr. Jim Fain up at Fort Leavenworth, who knows how to pronounce all those names and can wrangle those guys. And then have a concerted process. You know, it sounds simple, but in my civilian travels, one thing about events that I learned that we do very well in the military, but doesn't really track well in the civilian world is what we used to call backwards planning. In other words, you've got a time hack to meet that something's going to happen, whatever that big thing is. And in your case, since you were our MC for that event, you had to walk to that microphone. Okay, boom, there's the execution point that really needs to be hit on time, right? So then you take every possible little thing that needs to happen to build to that point, and you work backwards in time and say, okay, this needs to happen. And in order for that to happen, it's just a series of dominoes. So if I could explain it all very quickly, that's the one answer I would give is exercise the old backwards planning concept, you know, and think about an event that is that large. Think about it in small pieces over time. And then, oh, by the way, the underlying foundation, all of that is have the right team in place to help you get there, because you need to be able to analyze from your perspective. You might miss some event in time that needs to occur, but that other member of the team is going to come in and say, well, wait a minute, in order for you to do this, I've got to give you this. And so you need all the members of the team thinking through this detail over time. So that'd be the one way I would give you an answer to your question. Certainly there's lots of other things I could say, but if I boiled it down to one aspect, it'd probably be that backwards planning.
Hey, Mark, I have a follow-on question to that particular piece. Finding the right team actually requires a lot of networking to know people's skills. How did you build your network in creating a team of that size? Over.
Well, it hasn't been easy because, in the civilian world, people come and go. So, for example, one of the services I offer is web development, web design and development, right? Back in the old days, back in the 90s, I built my first website in 1994. What's funny is that anybody that ever works with me on web projects, they were barely born in 1994. So when I tell them that, they're like, there was internet back then, but it's really kind of funny. But so it's kind of fleeting. You have to be good at trying to vet people and pick them out, and then work with them. But I guess, the networking aspect, like you said, that's the key thing is, what I learned over time is to be a good team member for other people's projects. And that tends to put you in company of lots of contacts potentially to use on your project. So if I'm the consultant, even if I have to throw something in as a freebie, so to speak, I hate to use the evil word pro bono because nobody, sets the table every night with pro bono in mind. But if you're a good teammate for other people's projects, that can help you get to building the team members for your projects. Sometimes it's a long road. And I frankly have found myself on short notice hunting for a team member at the last minute, and it's tough. And so you lean back on your network and try to touch base with other people that could possibly give you a recommendation. And then sometimes it's a cold call. I did a cold call on a person for a web team not too long ago, and it actually has worked out very well, but it was a cold call to start with, so sometimes you have to take a little risk.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a question for Deann. Deann, so you talked about the kind of the volume of submissions for including into the Veterans Voices publication.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an editor who provides feedback, and is there editing on what is submitted, or is there some type of selection criteria or process for what actually ends up getting published?
That's a great question. And yes, we do have an editor. Our editor-in-chief is Margaret Clark. And believe it or not, she has been our editor-in-chief since 1973. So many of the women that were involved in this process, and I'll say women because most of them were women, although we do have board members that are men. This was a lifelong passion, and Margaret has been clearly, this has been a lifelong project of hers since she's been with us for so long. But yes, we do look at editing the work. Sometimes we have to make more edits than others to either make it more concise or to clarify. We also have a poetry editor, Tina, that works with us. So we try to leave it in the format of the author as much as possible, just because it's their work, but we do have to do some editing. Yes. We can always use editors. As our volume increases, we have ever more needs for editing. So we've developed in the last few years an online database for our works, and we can use online editors if anyone would like to join us.
So I have a follow-on question. So the organization has been around for 75 years.
Yes.
So obviously the digital version of the publication is pretty recent.
Yes.
But back in the day, was there a subscription or distribution plan for how people actually received and or contributed to it?
That's a good question. And prior to 10 years ago, I don't really know, but I think everything was mailed in, and we have volumes of paper that need to be digitally archived at some point. But for now, we still have authors that mail us work. Some of our older authors that have been with us a number of years will never submit online. and still send us handwritten manuscripts in the mail, and we have to have our typists type them up, and we then submit them digitally. But I would say we probably get about 30 things a month still in the mail from people that just do not like the computerized process. Most of the we're training people to do most everything online, but years ago everything was through the mail. They had a subscriber list of people they mailed the print publication to. We still do that. Like I said, we send about 5,000 out to the different VA locations and to veteran centers. But we have a steady list of subscribers as well.
Okay, very good. Another question for Mark, Deann, or the community? Anyone?
I will just add, Emma, that we are a group of all volunteers. So we don't have a staff. We have one part-time administrator in the office, but all of our editors, all of our Margaret Clark, our editor-in-chief, our board members, we're a working active board member, and everything is done by volunteers. So I think it's very impressive that the organization is still around 75 years later when it's a volunteer organization.
Right, absolutely. Okay.
I have a quick question for Deann.
Mhm.
Even though it's a volunteer organization, do you allow advertisements from small business owners for paid advertisement?
You know, we really have to be very careful. Since we're a nonprofit, we can't allow advertising in the magazine. We do allow for underwriting. So for instance, if some corporations donate specific dollar amounts for helping to publish the magazine, we can allow for the back cover to have their underwriting information and things like that. So if you want to discuss that, I would suggest reaching out to our office. I put our website and our office phone number in the chat, and that could be discussed.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Mark. Okay, so I know you and you've done work for Kansas City AUSA in our birthday celebration, but my question is for the variety of services and products that you are able to provide, which do you prefer to do? Do you like to do the kind of reputation management online, or do you like to create content for marketing materials or whatnot? I mean, there's a variety of talent that you have to offer, but what do you like to really focus in?
That's a hard question because obviously web projects can be very fun. You know, you can go a little nuts sometimes, depending on what it is. But probably where I get the most satisfaction is probably designing a print product. Now, whether that's delivered electronically or in some physical medium is different. Because even in 2021, audiences still appreciate. I have 3 grown children; they're all in their late 20s. They still appreciate a good print product. Now, not every day and all the time, but they certainly, and it has an impact. Print products still have their place in this world. So whether they're delivered again in the paper, physical medium or online somehow, I probably get the most satisfaction from those things. Now, the same amount of work goes into the writing and editing. So there's writing and editing involved in any of these kind of, tactics that you would undertake. But as far as actually producing it, I think there's just something fun about, finally getting that thing or seeing it on the web or whatever. So that's kind of an interesting thing.
Right. Very cool. Good.
I do want to make one point or make one comment. Deann was talking about you can't advertise in a nonprofit magazine. You can actually. It just changes your tax structure a little bit in terms of when it comes time to do your taxes. It just makes it a little bit more difficult, but you can advertise.
Yeah, we've had that conversation back and forth a lot of different times, and we've tended to be very conservative about our approach with that. That's something that we circle back to about every year. So
yeah, I mean, it would help you pay for the cost of the printing and so forth. You know, you just have to keep a right balance. If you're selling way more advertising than it's costing you, then you get into some real issues. But at the same time, it's a good problem to have. It's kind of like my accountant tells me every year when I grumble about paying taxes, he goes, "Well, that means you're making money. I want to punch you in the face," but you know.
That is true. It means you're making money.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, perhaps I should have you come in and talk to my board at some point, because
That might have to be a follow-on conversation. And I see
about punching them in the face or about advertising.
Looks like that
I
Roxanne
can do both, but you know.
also, but I don't know that we'll be able to cover that in a couple minutes. And our Q&A period actually is coming to a close. So why don't we go ahead and move on to our transition tip presenter. I did send a text to Jim to talk about T-Mobile being a military-friendly corporate, but he apparently is still in that event that he thought would be done by now. And so we will move on. And let me introduce Rob. Whoa. Gosh, this thing is like 5 inches from me. It's very loud. Okay. Where was I? All right. So to teach us our transition to today, we have Rob Hughes, who is currently serving in the Kansas Army National Guard. And I think he's a captain now. I've known him for a few years, and he was a lieutenant when I met him, but I think he's a captain now.
The paperwork is still getting pushed through.
Oh, really? Okay. But someone you might also recognize from TV, because Rob is a news anchor and reporter for KMBC and KCWE. So Rob, you are up for the transition tip.
Okay, 8 minutes, right? Because I've got a timer too. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
We could talk all night. All right, well, hey everyone, good evening. It's really an honor and a privilege to be with you. I know a lot of people on this call and previous calls, and it's really an honor. Like, yeah, like Emma said, I'm a Channel 9 and 29 and an infantry officer in the Kansas Army National Guard, and I'm a plans officer now. So that's why I was curious about how Mark plans events like the one we're talking about, because I know a lot goes into it. But with the short time I have, I just wanted to talk about 3 different things, and I wanted to provide you a really good take-home package, as we say when we do our OCT academies, which is observer controller trainer. But anyway, I want to give you something tangible that you can take home with, and that you can hopefully do something with, and hopefully I can help you in some way. Well, the 3 things I'd like to talk about this evening is, first, for my transition tip, is strategic and tactical communication. The second is professional appearance and how that leads to confident and articulate verbal communication and having a personal brand as you transition out. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about your presence, both your presence online, your presence in the community. We heard a little bit about networking, and I want to touch on that as well, and just further professional development to leave you with a take-home package this evening. Well, beginning with strategic and tactical communication, I've done speech debate. I speak and write for a living as well, and I know a lot of you will do that in your respective businesses as well. But really, I want to start with your why, which is when you transition out of the military. I've interviewed hundreds of veterans, and they always have a strong notion of service, and they want to serve their community. They want to serve in nonprofits. Whatever they do, they want to continue to serve. But you have to be able to produce a tangible product like Mark talked about. But you really have to know your why. And since I don't have that much time to talk about your why, I just want to direct you to a few resources. So your why is kind of like a command philosophy, which I'm sure you all have had that as senior NCOs and officers. But probably the most famous current contemporary professional and writer and speaker who talks about this concept is Simon Sinek. You probably all heard of him. He has one of the most listened to TED Talks, I think, on the planet. But I'd recommend a book called Start With Why. And it really helps you understand, why do you do what you do? How do you help people? How do you change the world? How you do what you do. Like Mark was talking about how you plan an event, but in whatever you do in your respective space, I would say you definitely want to understand why. And also there's a book called Find Your Why. This is actually written by Simon's staff. He actually didn't write this. I mean, it's got his name on it, but this is a workbook I'd recommend you go through as well, because before you can tactically communicate what you do, you have to understand why you do what you do. I mean, we can all give a good speech, but you have to understand, well, why do you do whatever your respective business is? And what's interesting is Simon talks about Viktor Frankl in his book, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist who was in some of the Nazi death camps of World War II. And he said that if you can understand your why, you can endure any how. But Frankl talked about Nietzsche in this book. So you can kind of see how this concept of why has been around for a very long time. So first I would say strategic and tactical communication, understand your why. And once you do that, then you can work on the tactics, on your elevator pitch. You can work on writing and speaking, like we heard about how important writing is from Mark and Deann. And in that regard, I would definitely recommend writing on your own, write a little bit every day. And I would recommend really take time to reflect and think about why you do what you do and be able to communicate that. I'd actually recommend meditating if you can. 20 minutes is ideal. And I would recommend you write and meditate and really get that balance to understand that notion. I'll move on now to professional appearance and confident and articulate verbal communication, having a personal brand. Now, real quick, at Channel 9, they do send consultants to help us with our wardrobe. I don't think anybody wants to hear about makeup. Maybe that's probably for another conversation. But I would recommend when you transition from the military to the civilian life, obviously you go from uniforms to now you got to purchase a wardrobe. And real quick, I would say it does make a big difference, your professional appearance. I personally don't spend a ton of money on wardrobe, but I would recommend for part of my take-home package is a place called Indochino. It's a Canadian, and this is more for the guys, but they're a Canadian company. They just opened in the plaza about 2 years ago for maybe $300. They will measure you. You can get a fantastic suit, shirt, and a lot of great products, jackets. But I think it's a good investment for when you're presenting to clients, for when you're presenting to investors and in your network. And then secondly, Tie Bar is great for ties. Tie Bar is the name of it. It's an online tie company. And for shoes, I'd recommend Cole Haan, which are the shoes that I personally wear. But continuing with your confident and articulate verbal communication, I would recommend Toastmasters, a group that I've been involved with for a long time. They have chapters everywhere, and they will help you with your public speaking. You'll start 30 seconds, explain who you are, what you do, and that's it. And then you'll work your way up to full-on 20-minute to an hour speeches as well. Also, TEDx KC, I mentioned TED Talks with Simon Sinek. They actually have TED Talks in Kansas City. Theirs was virtual last year, but I'd recommend getting involved with that. And lastly is, I'm not sure if I have any theater enthusiasts here, but there is actually a local organization called the Charlie Mike Theater Company, and they're comprised of veterans. And they haven't been able to do too much with COVID, but they will take you, and you don't necessarily have to be interested in going to Broadway or whatever, but they'll help you with what we call readers theater, which is what I used to do, and it helps you with your articulation, with your speaking, with your confidence. I know Emma mentioned sometimes people don't like to speak in public, but essentially any of these organizations, just get out there, speak in front of people, and that will help you take your why and be able to work on those tactics of presenting it, looking professional, and work on your personal brand, which is who you are. And I know I got a couple minutes left, Emma. So lastly, I'll move quickly to number 3, which is your networking, your professional development, and your presence, both in person and online. With COVID, a lot of our presence is online these days. But for this, I really just want to refer you to a lot of resources in our community. I know we got a lot of military here, and you've lived all over the world, and not through the military, but I've moved a lot, and I've lived in 6 states, and Kansas City probably has the best veteran community I've ever seen, with veteran service organizations, with veterans who will move here and establish roots here. And a couple I want to throw out really quick is regarding, for example, developing your LinkedIn profile or your social media presence. This actually just happened last week, but there's the Greater Kansas City Veterans Career Fair. I would highly recommend plugging in with that community, because even if you miss the event, you have Grantham University, you have a lot of veteran, I think over 200 veteran-friendly employers from across the region participate in that event. And as part of it, they have online workshops. And I know Grant Montgomery, I don't think he's on the call. He's presented before. He's a local retired Army financial advisor. He mentioned Bunker Labs KC, which is a national nonprofit. It's like a business incubator for veterans, and they'll help you with an idea. kind of like when Mark mentioned he first had his idea of starting his business. Well, they will take that and they will help you make it tangible, monetize it. They will give you the resources and they'll teach you. Because like Mark said, you can have a PhD in business, but if you can't run a business, then you can't produce a product to help somebody, right? So I'd recommend Buckler Labs KC. There's a lot of other organizations like this in town, but those are military specific. And lastly, I think I'm just about out of time. So Emma, let me wrap up with, I just want to leave you with a few podcasts and a few other websites that I'd highly recommend for your professional development. And some of the podcasts that I know Grant Montgomery mentioned one is called Veteran on the Move. It's run by Joe Crane, who's a retired Marine Corps pilot here in town. Okay, I know I'm out of town. And so it's called Veteran on the Move. They bring on a lot of veteran entrepreneurs to help you. And I think Shay Sparks has presented before. She has a podcast called Power of Investing in People. And then Guild Stories by Justin Rickliffs is another good local podcast. One called Lemme, Lemme, Be Brief, which is local CEOs and business owners who will briefly present their stories on that podcast. And lastly is Rounding the Bases by Joe Goldberg, who calls the Royals games. And real quick, let me go over 4 websites and then I'm done. These websites were recommended to be by my mentors for professional development, whether you're a business leader, whether you're still involved in the military like me. And that is From the Green Notebook is one, and there's also a podcast on that. The second is the Military Leader podcast and website. And then the last 2 are Company Commander, which is a website with a lot of good leadership articles. And lastly, Filigree Leader is the last article, or rather the last website I would recommend. And I believe I'm out of time. Thank you for your time and attention. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you all.
Thank you so much, Rob. Those were really great points in your transition tip. And glad that you were able to share those for our audience today. So let us go ahead and start wrapping up. There are some future announcements and things that I want to cover. So thank you to everyone who was a participant in the program and had questions. If you're interested in becoming more involved in some intentional conversations, like those that were kind of begun or introduced today, I would invite you to consider becoming an American Warrior of the club. Being a member of the club affords you with a lot of benefits. So you have access to any of the club facilities. We have 3 facilities here in Kansas City. We also have facilities in the Chicago suburbs and a facility outside of St. Louis and in Columbia, Missouri. You'll have access to over 20 interest groups. American Warriors is only one of them. You have an opportunity to join a business development team for personal and professional growth, access to all of the events, the members, and the locations through the directory, online and virtual learning and networking opportunities, as well as in person for those locations that have club facilities, and then opportunities to step up into leadership if you're interested in being a leader in a team, group, or a club location. So the things that are at the bottom, as far as the American Warriors here in Greater Kansas City, the Purple Connection and the Strengths Profile workshops, those are things that they can support and invite guests to as often as they like. These are things that I, in my role as the executive director for American Warriors, I host and facilitate these. The discussion group is a specific to club members and their guests. That is next week, actually, coming up. And then the executive committee is a leadership group for the interest group. Next slide. So here are some details on some of these future events. The discussion group next week it can be attended in person or at the club. It is a routine meeting, the 4th Thursday of the month. This month's discussion topic is on decisions. So when you're in transition, there's a lot of things that are changing, not just the career. So some of the decisions that you make will support what kind of resources you're going to need or the kind of information that you're trying to seek from the community. So that's what the topic of discussion will be next week. The Intro to Strengths Profile workshop is the first Thursday of each month. You can attend these at the club or virtually as well. The first half hour of this workshop is free. It's basically introduction to the assessment and what it is, how is it different from other assessments. This is really a useful tool for folks in transition because it helps equip them with self-awareness on where their strengths and abilities could be, especially if they're looking to do something different from what they used to do in the service. The additional hour of the workshop then is for those who decide that they want to take the assessment. And so there's a nominal cost for the assessment. You get the report immediately upon completion, and then I would overview on the report and follow up with any questions and what's next if they want to actually get intentional in applying that tool in their transition planning or whatnot. The Purple Connection, as you all know, is every third Thursday. It will always be a Zoom and open to anyone who is willing to contribute and participate. Next slide. So the lineup for next month, we have our veteran entrepreneur is going to be John Nelson, an Army retiree. He has a consulting business. He's the CEO of Morris Nelson and Associates. Our community organization will be Mark Thompson, another Army retiree representing Western Governors University. Our military-friendly corporate will be John Busa, Army retiree. And speaking about Honeywell, FMNT, and the opportunities there. And then our transition tip will be provided by Scott Weaver, an Army retiree who is also a business ethics adjunct professor. So next slide. You can contact me for any additional information. If there is someone in particular that maybe you miss getting their contact info or want to reach out about anything that has been said or suggested in today's program, reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn. We do have a Purple Connection group on LinkedIn. So if you want to continue some of the conversations and engage with each other within the TPC community in between events, that is available for you to join and engage within. And next slide, last slide. Thank you everyone for being here and continuing to come. If you're a regular, please reach out to each other. And if you have not already shared your point of contact information in the chat channel, or you have specific support and information that you are looking for within the community, please share that now in the chat channel so that we can save that before we stop the event. So everyone will receive a cleaned up copy of the chat channel, everyone in attendance, and the folks who had to peel off for another obligation, they will, as well as everyone who registered for the event, receive a link for the recording. So thank you everyone for being here, and I really appreciate your continued support of what we're doing here.
Thank you,
Have a good
Emma.
evening, everyone.